Hello, welcome to the MuseScore Café. This is August. I should check the date so we know what day it is. You all know what day it is. It's the 22nd. And I am Marc Sabatella. I am the Director of Education for MuseScore. And as I like to do, I'm just going to be talking about some different things about MuseScore, some things that some of you might find interesting. And these are very informal, these cafe sessions. So I encourage you to watch this on the YouTube site. If you're watching on my Mastering MuseScore site, feel free to click the YouTube button so that it takes you to the YouTube site where you can actually participate in the comments. I wish that was possible on my site. It just currently isn't. I have some ideas for things that I would like to talk about today, but I'm not really, I'm not married to any particular ideas. So I highly encourage people to leave me comments and suggestions. I will flip over periodically and check the dashboard over here to see if anyone's added any comments. The things that I have in mind right now is it is back to school time, right? I mean, I teach at a university, Regis University, here in Denver, Colorado, and I've taught at a number of other schools and continue to do other teaching here and there, and so that is a big part of what I do is thinking about teaching music and then teaching MuseScore as a tool for helping you learn music, for making music, and etc. I figured I would tell you a couple of things that I've done, that I am doing, just to keep you abreast of that. So as Director of Education, it's sort of an open-ended title, but I see my role as being to help anyone who wants to learn MuseScore by providing resources like my book and my website for that. And again, if you haven't visited my website, masteringmusescore.com, there's a lot of free resources there, and it's also links where you can buy the book, Mastering MuseScore, which is kind of the comprehensive official guide to using MuseScore. It's just more in-depth than the online reference. And one of the things that I also do is I do outreach to organizations. I've done presentations for like the Major Orchestra Librarian Association. Last week I did a presentation for the music teachers in a local school district. I've done it for the state Music Educators Association and so forth, and I'm interested in going around the country or the world, if people will have me, doing workshops and so forth. So just teaching people how to get the most out of MuseScore. One of the other things that I do is just working with schools and helping them and their students get the most out of MuseScore. And as someone who teaches in schools myself, I feel like, especially at the university level, I have a lot of insight there and hopefully good ideas to share. And then I have a lot of good friends who teach in the grade schools, and so I get a lot of ideas from them to pass along. And I'm really interested in working with elementary schools and high schools and other grade levels. So those are some of the things that I do. I guess one of the things that is such a big part of my existence, teaching music theory, which is one of the courses that I've taught the most. I taught a jazz theory course for many years at University of Denver, and I've taught standard music theory courses as well. And one of the big things that one does in a college-level music theory course is do 4-part SATB, soprano, alto, tenor, bass writing. And I've had my mind in that world a little bit lately for a number of reasons. And I sort of had it in my mind that I was going to take Mary Had a Little Lamb, which is a song I often use for demonstrations, and just do a quick 4-part arrangement of that. We'll see if I get all the way through it or not, but just talking about some of the things that I do. So what I've done is I've entered the melody and just the most basic, the roots of the chords, the 1 chord and the 5 chord. And I'm gonna, we'll just listen to it first, see where it is. There you go. That is absolutely as simple as can be. I'm going to dress up the harmony a little bit, and I'm going to add, alto and tenor parts to this. So one of the things that you will often want to do in a music theory course is Roman numeral analysis. And MuseScore doesn't have a built-in Roman numeral feature. It has a figured bass feature, but that's a little bit different, and it doesn't actually work as well for Roman numerals as you might like. What I usually use for Roman numerals actually is lyrics. So if I attach lyrics to the bass voice, if I was actually trying to enter the lyrics to Mary Had a Little Lamb, I'd have to rethink this strategy, but I'm not. And if I do, I'll attach it to the soprano voice anyhow. So I'm going to use the lyric feature, and I'm going to enter the Roman numerals here. So that's a 1 chord, and what I like about that is it automatically tracks the chords. 1 chord, another 1 chord, 5 chord, 1 chord, 1 chord, 1 chord, 5 chord, 1 chord. I should mention also there's this really cool font that I have installed. It's kind of hard to find, but someone posted it again to the forum. So if you go to musescore.org and search for the font that I'm about to show you, it's called Sicilian Numerals. And Sicilian Numerals, I will do that, and I'll maybe make it a little bigger too. The Sicilian Numerals font, it's a Roman type of font. Right now, it doesn't look obviously different, but watch what happens when I type 1, 6. See, it does that. And if I type 1, Shift 6, it superscripts that 6. And if I type 1, Shift 6, 4, I get that, right? So I get those things that, if you are into Roman numeral analysis, can come in handy. So, that's something that you might, if you find that Sicilian numerals font, you might find that useful. All right, so one of the things that I want to do before I actually add some inner voices here is I'm going to do a little bit of reharmonization. Now, teaching a jazz theory course, I teach all sorts of techniques, and so a lot of these things come in very, they come very naturally to me, and I am also working on, I've written a book that's called The Harmonic Language of Jazz Standards that talks about some of this, and I'm currently working on additional material based on kind of ways that I've refined some of that thinking. So let me just tell you a couple of the things that that I've come to realize. One of them is a principle that's I would put this way: anything 5 can do, 2/5 can do better. Sometimes I say and vice versa. If you have a 2/5, it can be simplified. So what do I mean by that? What I mean is that instead of just a whole measure of the 5 chord here, we could have a 2 and then a 5. For classical people, you're probably thinking more 4 instead of 5. But in the jazz world, we really love 2-5-1 for a number of reasons. So I'm actually going to go that way. So I'm going to make that a half note. I pressed 6 to do that. This is Shift Alt down moves diatonically. I tend to just use these keyboard shortcuts for things like this a lot. And then a D there, and 5 there. This guy is actually 2. And then I think the same thing in this measure. So copy and paste it there. Why is this the case? I don't know. There's something that's very satisfying in the idea of landing on what's called a subdominant chord, a 2 chord or a 4 chord, rather than landing on the 5 chord at the beginning of the phrase. There's something that allows the previous phrase to lead to this in a very nice and natural way. And again, especially in a jazz context, I will say, is where a lot of these techniques come from. But they're not just jazz techniques at all. It's just that my experience working with this in a jazz setting makes it more, I'm more familiar with certain patterns. So one of the things now that I have a 2 chord here, I said I want to get to that 2 chord. Well, the single most common thing you can do to want to get to any chord is to give it what's called a secondary dominant. basically you look at this and pretend that this is its own key and say, well, what would the 5 chord in that key be? So this, if we looked at this as the key of A minor, what does the 5 chord in A minor look like? And the answer is it's an E chord. So instead of having a whole measure of the 1 chord here, I kind of want to have an E chord in here, an E, like an actual E major chord. It's the 5 chord of the 2 chord. So what I will do is, for now, just change that to an E. Well, I'm going to not assume my bassist can sing that low. And so I'm going to go this way. And in the classical nomenclature, this would be 5 of 2 is how we notate that. Frankly, I guess as the jazzer in me, I would just as soon just call that thing 6. Personally, but that's okay. We're going to call it this. But now we're also going to take advantage of that thing that I said anything 5 can do, 2 can do, 2 5 can do better. I'm going to take this 5 and split it up into a 2 and a 5. So I will turn that here, and actually what I'll do is just paste it right here. And then over here, I'm going to ask myself, well, what would the 2 chord in A minor be? And the answer is it's a B half diminished chord. So B, and then if I put my lyric there, it's 2 half diminished. And boy, if I remember in the Sicilian numerals font how to make the half diminished symbol, that would be really nice. Somewhere I have a guide for that. I know in the chord symbols in MuseScore, you type 0 to get it, but that didn't seem to do it. Typing 0 gave me something else. There is, I'm sure, some symbol that I would, yeah, I don't know what it is. Well, I'll just call it 2. So this is 2 of 2. If I knew how to make that half diminished symbol, I'd be really happy. Somewhere I've got the document that tells me how. I'm looking to see. I'm checking my phone because I'm checking comments here. Hopefully people are watching and listening and can hear me. So I should turn up the sound just to be sure. Am I making sound? Oh, am I not making sound? That would be bad if I've been talking all this time and not making sound. Looks like I am. Okay. And I am Marc Sabatella. I am the Director of Education there we are. For MuseScore. I am making sound. All right, cool. All right, so I'm going to make the same change over here. So I'm going to just play this the way it is right now so you can hear what's actually changed about it. As far as the reharmonization goes, there's a few other things that I would do if I really wanted to make this especially jazzy. I'm gonna not do much of that, but I do feel like I don't want this just to be a 1. I want there to be what's called a turnaround. I want to basically insert a 5 chord here. So I'm just gonna make this a half note, and I'm going to make this be a 5, but again, anything 5 can do, 2 5 can do better. So I'm going to make this a beat of 2 and a beat of 5, and have this. So just listening to this part again. All right, so at this point, I now have the harmonic motion is basically every 2 beats except this measure and the last measure, but that's fine. I feel like I want something in this measure. Well, here again, my experience as a jazz musician just screams at me a particular pattern here that I know works well here. But I'll just put out this other idea that really diatonic chords can be inserted anywhere that you think they're going to work and work with the melody. It's when you get to non-diatonic chords you really have to be careful about them. But as far as diatonic chords, I could really put anything here in the middle of the measure. But there's a couple of chords that are especially like stable. Well, the 1 chord is stable. It doesn't need to go anywhere. The 4 chord is the other most stable chord, and I haven't used it yet. So I'm actually going to use that here. So I'm going to turn this into a half note and put a 4 chord there. And then I will copy this measure down here. So I think at this point I have a good starting point for my There we go. So it's a little more interesting than just the 1 chord and the 5 chord we started with. All right, at this point, some people, I'm sure, do well by planning out their alto and tenor parts. I'm a more just stick them in and see what happens. All right, well, one thing I know is if I'm going to do this on 2 staves, this is going to need to be in voice 2, not voice 1. And I wasn't thinking about that, but no problem. All I do is select that region, and I go here, edit voices, and move it to voice 2. So now I have voice 1 free for entering a tenor part. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to be really simple about this at first. I'm going to enter some half notes. Now I should mention, when I'm doing this for real, I seldom compose at the computer. I compose either at the piano or just with a piece of paper and pencil, or both, because I'm usually erasing and scribbling out and working out ideas, and I'm comfortable enough with MuseScore that I can do almost everything I need to do easily, but I recognize it's not really the most efficient tool compared to my memory. Working at the piano with my memory, I can work things out, or using paper and pencil. But of course, I'm trying to demonstrate MuseScore and talk about MuseScore, so that's how I'm doing this. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to enter half notes to fill out these chords, and I'm going to do it, I guess, a little bit. I'm thinking about how I want to do this. I'm going to do this kind of 1 chord at a time, but I'm going to switch to voice 2. I'll just click voice 2 here. And to me, I'm going to look at this and think, doubling wise, I probably want to double my root, and then I'm missing a D. So if I put the G here and the D there, that works, but it's a pretty top-heavy voicing. I think I'd rather spread things out. Put my D here. Oops, I meant that to be a half note. I'm going to press W. That doubles the length of the note. And then, and I'm thinking ahead, that's going to be a G I'm going to have here. Well, when I get to this chord here, boy, that D sure seems like it wants to go up to an E. I mean, yes, it could come down to a C, and that would be that. In fact, that could be better. Then I'd have a G down to an E. And this is why I like to do this pencil and paper, because then I can really try it out. But I'm gonna try it both ways. I'm gonna try it this way first, and then in the bottom voice, so Alt down, I talked about there being a G, and then I didn't talk about it. And I guess this would be, oh, see, now if I do this, what do I get? Y'all know what that is? That's parallel octaves. That's a no-no. You don't do this. Double G here, double C here. Now, here's a really cool thing. I'm going to show you that MuseScore is happy to find this for you. This is a plugin that you can download from the MuseScore website. And once you've downloaded it and installed it, check harmony rules. Boom. And it tells you that's open 8. Oh, that just tells you, okay, that's what it calls them instead of parallel. But it's highlighted these notes to tell me, oh, that's a no-no. So anyhow, this idea that you have 2 notes an octave apart and then the next beat is 2 more notes an octave apart, that's just a no-no. So having this D go to an E sounded like a good idea, but it's not such a great idea if I double the C. Now, if I take this down to a G and I have the G doubled, there's nothing wrong with this. Having the 5th doubled of the chord, you know, it's fine. So this is a possibility. Another possibility would be to have this guy go down to C, this guy go down to E. And then it's kind of subjective, which you like best. Let me listen to this one. I kind of think the one I was just on is going to be what I'm going to pick. All right, so there's that. That's a little bottom heavy here. So the other version I had with the E here, with the G double common tone there. So a little smoother voice leading and a little better spacing. I'll have to decide if I like the double G. I'm going to live with it. At this point, I'm happy with that measure. Realistically, if I was doing this, I would probably keep going ahead. I would map these both out, see where they led, and then pick the one. It's kind of like thinking chess. You think a few moves ahead, and then based on where you get after 4 moves, which takes you to the best place, that helps you decide what your next move should be. So in this measure, I'm going to basically just take the same approach of Control-Alt-2 is the shortcut here. I'm going to look at this 2 of 2. Now, I said half diminished is normally what a 2 chord is in a minor key, but there's actually no reason and the half diminished chord would have an F natural in it. But since F sharp is in the key signature, there's really no harm in having the F sharp here. So I kind of feel like at this point I have 2 Bs. I need a D and I need an F sharp. I feel like the D here and the F sharp there is the pretty natural thing to do. So natural that it's almost, I say that, but now look what I have now is parallel fifths. That doesn't fly. So, yeah, life can get a little complicated when you're doing this 4-part writing, but you do have to be on the lookout for these things. So instead, I could say, well, let me take this guy all the way up to D, take this guy up to F sharp, and see if I like this. It's a big leap here, but that's not bad. Or I could revisit this decision. You know, that's the other thing I could do. I'm gonna go with this, but you know, I could use that as an excuse again to go back to my other choice here, which was E and C, and then see where that led here. But I'm just gonna plow forward. Here, I need this to be the 5 chord, and that definitely is going to mean a G sharp. So this guy feels like having this guy leap to a G sharp would be a really bad idea. He's already just done a big leap. I don't need to give him another big leap. So I'm going to take this guy and make him, or her, as the case may be. It's an alto, I suppose I should be calling it her. G sharp. And now this chord, it could be just a triad and therefore another E, but in the jazz world especially, but even in the classical world, making this a dominant 7th is actually quite common. And that would allow me to keep this common tone. So I'm just going to enter that as a D. So, and maybe I'll update this to reflect it. At this point, 5/7 didn't actually, when I did the shift 7, it didn't look as good. I guess that's really, sorry. I haven't used this font enough to be totally comfortable with how to do things in it. So I just say 5/7 over 2. All right. I would have preferred the 7 superscripted, but when it did that, it lined it up differently. Yeah, this is just fine. I know now that this G sharp is like going to lead into the A here, and it's going to give me a tripled A, but that's fine. That's very common when dealing with dominant 7th chords, that the resolution is going to involve a tripled root. And then this guy is going to come down to, oops, I meant voice 1. Let me go back to voice 1. Into the C. He comes down here to the 3rd of this chord. And this guy in voice 2 is going to go to the A. Now, it's allowed to not resolve there. If you want to resolve it to the E to complete the triad, you're allowed to. I think... So I'm already a little... See, as a jazz person, I really dislike having the root in the melody. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to resolve it that way, and then I'm going to talk about alternatives in a second here. I'm going to resolve it that way. Oops, I didn't mean that. I meant A. There we go. So let me play this here as we have it so far. All right. So what I'm thinking here is, I've mentioned this idea that this chord here is has a tripled root. That's not a terrible thing, but it doesn't make me comfortable having the melody also doubling the root there. It feels like it's possible to get more interesting sounds out of it. And so I'm going to show you the simple classical thing that I might do, which is just raise that guy, put this guy in first inversion. It didn't create any parallel octaves here. So this as a possibility is certainly valid. But, oh, and then now at that point, I have 2 roots and 2/3. Maybe I do decide that this guy, I'm just going to do what's called frustrate this leading tone. Let this G sharp not go to A, but go to E instead. I could try that. That's not bad. That's not bad at all, in fact. Boy, I like it enough that I almost just want to go on and not do the other thing that I wanted to do. But let's remember this. In fact, let's just add a few more measures and let's just copy these guys so I have them again to refer to. I'm just going to stick them over here in my little scratch pad. All right, see, what I feel like is if I had chosen to put this thing in an inversion and then let this guy, so this big leap up, now that this is an inversion, I kind of want to bring this guy down. I'd love to bring him down by step, but that's not in the chord. If I bring him down to the B, oh, nope, I need that guy to be the G sharp. The G sharp's got to be somewhere. What I was aiming for was thinking, well, gee, if this guy was, let this thing be the 7th and resolve down. I'll just let this be this. This is one of the things they tell you is not a great idea, a leap up followed by a step in the same direction, but it's not terrible. And if I do this, now this bass note is the 7th of the chord resolving by step. And now this guy can keep the common tone, and this guy can go back to where he really wanted to be. Let me see what this one sounds like. See, I like that too. There you go. That's another possibility. The jazzer in me wants to do something else. The jazzer in me wants to restore this version of it, but do what's called a tritone substitution here. I had an A chord, and what I want to do is do what's called a tritone substitution. It's those of you who are coming from a classical perspective, if I call this an augmented 6th chord, you might be happier. It's a predominant chord. It's going to lead to this 5 chord. And the way that works is I put this as an E flat. So I'm just going to actually use the classical term. I'm going to call this an augmented 6th chord, and I'll even spell it as an augmented 6th chord. It might make some of you happy. If I spell it as an augmented 6th chord, it's spelled this way. The doubling here is a little awkward, but a jazz person would call this D flat, so that this basically looks like an E flat 7th chord. But in a classical realm, this is called an augmented 6th chord. And let me fill out this chord here. Let me go to voice 2 and put in the F. What did I do? I mean, didn't I enter this A in voice 2 already? Yeah. So when I move over here, 6, F sharp, there we go. I don't know what happened. but I obviously hit something wrong. This chord here is what's called a French augmented sixth. It's sort of a non-standard doubling. There should be a G in it also. So maybe I'll just let that G sharp go to the G. Add courtesy accidentals. Boom, and it figures out that that's needed. Now, this sound here is one that I love. I absolutely love this sound. I haven't heard it in this context, but let's see how you guys like it. I mean, to me, that's just beautiful. And so I think I'm just going to finish out the phrase really simply. And in voice 2, let that F sharp go to G. Oops, as a half note. And I'm thinking ahead. If I bring this down to E, that'll probably be the smartest thing. Because if I go up to A, well, if I go to A, that would be okay too. Either way, I'm going to need a C, and this guy isn't the C. I'm going to hope that the C is in the tenor voice, and that seems very likely. So I'll bring this down to E, and that will allow the C to be here to fill out that 2 chord. So over here in voice 1, it looks like this chord is missing at this point the 5th, the D, and again, I keep forgetting to set the duration the way I want. Oh, I did have it set the way I wanted, half note. And now in this chord, I'm going to need a C, and then, oh, I'm going to have moving voices in here. Maybe I'll let this C ride, so that's actually a dominant 7th C. I'm a dominant 7th 5. Hello, double click. 7. And then, so at this point, there is not an F sharp. So this guy needs to be a quarter note. So I pressed Q to half the length of it, and then an F sharp. So this gives me that. Now let me change this notation to be the proper French. I typed a capital F and I got a D in this font. That's probably for some reason. There's probably some shortcut that gives me French. So I probably need to learn this font more if I'm going to use it. But it's an augmented 6th chord. Maybe I'll lie and call it an Italian. Nope, I can't type that either. So I need to learn. I'm just randomly trying keys and seeing if any of them give me the FR for French. I'm not seeing it. These are, but it looks like there's nicely. Looks at D is a 6/4. Oh, S is a 6/4. That's nice to know. Anyhow, I at this point am going to have to give up on that font because I don't really know how to use it. I know it's cool, but I don't know how to use it. So I'm going to go back to free serif. Which is just a plain Roman font. Now I can type French 6th. Cool. So at this point, I have 4 measures of a reasonably decent harmonization. There you go. That's not too bad. I could continue to do other things involving inversions and so forth. I certainly can copy these couple of measures over here and just reuse that. Probably I don't want to use that same French 6th trick there. So I think instead I'm going to do this. And now I get to actually finish the thing. So that was going to be my F sharp. I'm just basically copying the same thing from here. Now I don't want the parallel octaves here. If I made this thing be a D, I now have parallel octaves here, and that's a no-no. So I have to maybe use that trick of the, maybe I'll do that trick. Yeah, I'm going to go with that. And let this maybe be a doubled E. I'll let this guy go to the A. And actually, you know, now it doesn't have to be a triad. This could be a seventh chord. I can make that be a G also. And it should get a courtesy accidental. I'll set it manually. And if I fill out this last chord, voice 2, I'll let that F sharp resolve to the G. It's going to triple my root, or I could frustrate it and go to the D. I think I'll do that. And then I'll let this guy be B. So just like that, I copied those couple of measures, except this is no longer 5/7. It's 5. What is it? The second. It's 4/2. I guess is the no 6/4/2. Yeah, that's the way we abbreviate that inversion. And this guy is now in first inversion. So if I had the Sicilian font, I could make these guys stack nicely. That's the nice thing about that font. But again, I need to learn to use it. Let me get rid of these extra measures, select them all, Control Delete. I now have a passable arrangement. Let me just listen to that part because I haven't heard it yet. Except it's not. It's ba-da-ba-da-dum. So I need to fix the melody, and that happened when I did the copy and paste. And this is also that also is actually a quarter note, and then another quarter note. So all right, so the whole thing start to finish. So, not bad at all. There's some things that I look at with my my music theory eye. I'm looking at this as being the 7th of this chord and thinking really it should resolve down to the 3rd here and should really resolve down to the B. I now have a doubled B, which not necessarily a problem. I heard that B. Did you all hear that B stand out? It really did to me. Yeah, I actually didn't like it. So I'm actually going to break that rule. I'm going to let this 7th not resolve by step. To me, that actually sounded better. Did I create any parallelisms or anything else objectionable in there? No, I really didn't. Here I've got a leading tone I frustrated. Let me see if I like it better. Actually resolve that leading tone. Maybe I do. Boy, I suppose I should try this again and see if that changes anything. I don't think I'm going to like it any better, but maybe I'll give him the D. At least then this guy gets to move by step. Yeah, maybe this is my answer. Yeah, okay, that's my answer. So this is my 4-part arrangement. If I was then making it more musical, I would be looking at playing with some rhythm, seeing if there were some opportunities for passing tones, suspensions, and other things in here. But this basically completes my harmonization, at least in four voices, which is something. This guy's stuck selected. Let me click him again. You got to see a little bit about some MuseScore techniques while I was at it, but you also got to see where my head is at when I'm doing 4-part arrangement, when I'm teaching music theory. And maybe you found that interesting, maybe even got to get a little useful music out of it. I think I'll post this to MuseScore.com because it's kind of fun. I might, but before I do, let's make sure I didn't screw anything up. let me run that check harmony rules. It's very picky about things. It might find some things. Augmented interval. Oh yeah, so it doesn't like the half-step motion here. It's something that, yeah, augmented intervals you do avoid in many cases, but this is one of the places where they are considered just fine. So the interval, there's always going to be augmented intervals. Well, I shouldn't say always, but there will often be augmented intervals involved with these French sixth chords. In this case, it was due to my decision to make this be a seventh here. If I'd taken that up to the A, then I wouldn't have gotten that interval. But this isn't a problem. It's just a warning. So undo that. Yeah, I like this. I'm going to play with it a little bit more, and then I think I'm going to upload it. I don't see any questions or anything. I hope some people were enjoying this, and if not, then maybe some people will watch it and enjoy it later. But I had fun doing it because I haven't done an exercise like this in a little while, and it was kind of fun for me to get into this. So anyhow, I will with that sign off, and if you think of things you'd like to see me work on, talk about next week, let me know. I can tell you some of the things that are coming up. I know maybe next week, maybe the week after, I want to talk about the Google Summer of Code, because that we just are in the process of completing that, where we had some student programmers that's Google sponsors to work on open source software, and we had 3 of them working on MuseScore, and so that is in the process of wrapping up. Everyone's finishing their final submissions and all. So when that's all said and done in the next week or two, I want to be able to show some of the work that they've done. Some of it's going to be merged. Well, hopefully all of it will be something that will become part of MuseScore 3 eventually. And so I want to be able to show you some of the stuff that they've worked on, because it's pretty cool stuff. All right, so enjoy your next week. Enjoy making music if you're going back to school. As I'm going back to teach, I hope you have a great school year, and I'll see you next week.